Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for your filmmaking at home workshop this afternoon. My name is Sam. I'm a film and moving image production graduate from Norwich University of the Arts. I'm now based here within the recruitment and outreach team. I will shortly be passing you over to my colleague Gavin, who will be leading the session for you this afternoon. But before we begin, we've just got a couple of housekeeping rules that I will very briefly run you through. So firstly, if you could just keep your audio and visuals turned off just for now, that will help us just to run the session as smoothly as possible. But if you do have any technical issues or any questions for either myself or for Gavin, you can direct them to us in the chat function. You should be able to select who you want to talk to there as well. So if it's something more technical, feel free to drop me a message. If it's around the workshop, Gavin should be able to answer that for you instead. Now, we are also recording this session, so if your internet drops out or if our connections don't stay sort of perfect throughout, then we will make this available to you after, so if anything is missed, you will be able to catch up with it there. This workshop is also one of many workshops that we are running online during this sort of strange, uncertain time, and they are running weekly, typically on a Wednesday. We do have another session coming up next week, which is an intro to typography workshop. And if you are interested in booking a place onto that workshop or any of the others, do just head over to our website and you should be able to book your place there. Thank you again for joining us, and I'll pass you over to Gavin now.
Lovely, thank you very much, Sam. So thank you all for joining today. So yes, we'll be looking at filmmaking at home. And before I dive into the presentation, so my name's Gavin. I'm also a film and moving image production graduate from Norwich University of the Arts, and I'm part of the outreach and recruitment team as a NICO outreach officer. And like Sam says, if you have any questions during the presentation about the session, just use the chat function and I'll do my best to answer them. But we'll also be doing a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So either ask away during or save your questions for afterwards. So we're going to be looking through 3 different points throughout this session. So the first of all, we're going to be looking at opportunities that are available in the UK film industry. And then we're going to get to everything about filmmaking at home. So looking at how to shoot with mobile devices, and then also how to edit on mobile devices as well. So the UK film industry, there's a lot of people that say about creative arts not being a big money maker or it's not an important or vital industry, where in fact it couldn't be any more wrong. And especially when we look at the film industry itself. So these are figures from 2017, and the industry was worth £14.8 billion. And we would think that's 3 years ago. Imagine the worth of the film industry now. And this is just in the UK alone. And it's such an astronomical figure. And within the film industry, in 2018, there were 15,595 companies in the film industry alone. So if we think about the amount of money that's involved in film here in the UK and the amount of companies, how many jobs do we think that involves? It's a lot. So you can put to rest all the taboos about film being extremely competitive and not making any money, where it couldn't be more wrong. It's worth billions, and there's thousands of jobs out there. And these are just a few of the jobs available. Now, I imagine some of these you're all very familiar with, especially popular job roles like producers and directors. You've got screenwriters and camera operators and whatnot. But there's also roles which you may not be so familiar with, and certainly ones that I weren't familiar with when I first started out studying film. So things like gaffers and best boys. We've got grips and colorists. So there's a whole roster of roles to dive into within the film industry. Now, I like to use this image as a really good example of different roles and jobs that happens and is available throughout every single production. So this is behind the scenes from a film called Belle, which was directed by Amma Asante, who so happens to be our new Chancellor for Norwich University of the Arts. So this is her in action. And if you look immediately towards the cast there, so you think about who designed the costumes that they're wearing. So you need a costume designer for that. And then you need a wardrobe assistant who fits those costumes onto your actors. And then, of course, we've got Amma herself directing. And then behind, we see there's loads of crew members there. So they're probably camera operators, or if you see like the train, it almost look like train tracks in the background. So that's a piece of equipment using dolly and tracks. So you've got a few people operating that. So there's so many jobs just within that one image itself. But of course, filming moving image, usually a lot of people immediately think about live action. But of course, we can't forget about animation as well, which is a huge part of film. And, you know, it's a huge part of film as a medium and as an art form. And Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is a great example because it incorporates both 2D animation, where it's a lot more hand-drawn and traditional, and it also incorporates 3D animation as well. So you're using computer-generated images within particular software. And then as well, you've got visual effects too, which is now humongous amongst films. I mean, if you've seen a Marvel film and you're sitting through the credits to get to that, the little end credit sequence there, and you go through the thousands of names, and most of it are made up of visual effects artists. So the visual effects industry within film and moving image is absolutely huge. And surprisingly, UK is one of the biggest places in the world for visual effects. And if you look at this image here, so it's War Machine flying through Avengers Infinity War, I believe it is. And you need somebody, or well, a whole team of people who create the model for War Machine. And you've got a whole team of artists who are creating the backgrounds that he's flying in. And you need a whole other team of people who puts all those images and pieces together. So even though film, you just think of live action filmmaking, there's also animation and visual effects as well. So this is a little kind of careers map provided by Screen Skills and Into Film, which are two places I definitely recommend you check out for jobs and careers within film. But what I love about this is that it really shows how many different skills can be utilized within the film industry. And my favorite being, if you look on the craft side of things, you've got construction managers. So their background probably isn't so much film and media, but they've probably gone through college, university, apprenticeships, or some other routes that's all around construction, and they've managed to transfer their skills into the world of film. And it's the same, there's a really fantastic interview out there with a college student who's training to be an electrician, and then he actually moved on to working on film sets because it's not going to be your directors and screenwriters building these huge sets that you're going to shoot these gigantic films on. They're all made by people with those skills, constructions and electricians who are building all this. So film is a really amazing place that accommodates so many different skills. So let's get into the meat of the workshop of filmmaking at home. And of course, looking at how to shoot, we're going to be looking at theoretically first, because it still applies. It doesn't matter how big or small your budget or your production is, you still need to apply the same filmmaking theories. So, of course, a good one to start off is composition and rule of thirds. It doesn't matter, as I say, it doesn't matter whether you're at home or on a huge film set, you still need to apply the rule of thirds when it comes to your film. So either using the left or the center or the right of frame to position your character or your object or whatever you're filming. And this is a really good example with a Simpsons interview. So really what you want is, because us as an audience, our eyes automatically go to different places within a frame. And if you look at the lines where they're intersecting, that's where you want your subject to be. So you got, I'm going to butcher his name, Matt Groening. I've probably got it wrong, but his eyes are just above this intersection there. So our eyes automatically go there, and we automatically connect with Matt in the interview. And you can play around with all those different intersections within the frame. And another thing you need to think about is your background location. And this one does directly link to videoing at home, because there might be, because obviously filming at home, it's in your personal private space. So you need to think about exactly what the audience can see in the background when you're shooting. You might not want certain objects or things to appear in the background, and you want the whole world to see. So be careful what you're putting into your background. But also thinking on a film theory level as well, you want your background to be populated with things that make sense to the story that you're telling. So going back to the Simpsons interview there, and we're just to reiterate that the topic being discussed in the interview with Matt is about the Simpsons. We've literally got cutouts of the Simpsons characters in the background. And the great thing is that, yes, it's a little bit colourful, but it doesn't detract from Matt. It's not an explosion of colour and objects all across the frame. And of course, we don't want to forget about sound either. Now, in this image here, using mobile devices, you've obviously got built-in microphones, but you can also get these clever little peripherals as well, where you get these little mini microphones that plug directly into a audio jack on your mobile device. And they tend to be quite cheap as well, usually, and quite easily accessible online or going into stores as well. So thinking about shooting with mobile devices in the home, don't forget about sound either, because the microphones on phones, they're good, but obviously they're not as good as a Zoom recorder or whatever you're using in school, college, or bigger productions. So you need to think about how close you are to your subject or your character, but also think about the room that you're in as well. There could be a lot of homes where if you're in, say, a kitchen or a bathroom, it could be quite echoey. So you need to think about the location as well where you're filming, because it's going to affect your sound in a big way. So don't forget about your sound there. But overall, when it comes to shooting, the most important thing is shooting in the way that best tells the story. Even though you're quite limited in shooting at home, you still need to think about, okay, in shooting this composition in this room, what does it do to tell the story? Does it help advance the story in any way? And that's the real key thing. It's easy to make a shot that looks pretty, but does the shot actually add anything? Does it make your character look small or big or powerful or scared? So he's using the camera as a tool to help further your story that you want to tell to your audience. So shooting with mobile devices, obviously, be it tablet, phone, or some other device that captures footage, they've obviously got built-in camera apps. So if you're an Android or iPhone user, you've got a pretty comprehensive camera application that's built in there. And the amazing thing with phones nowadays is that we're getting phones that shoot 4K footage at high frame rates. It's absolutely amazing what phones can do nowadays. But there's a lot of applications out there that can really help boost the tools that you get. So what you see on the screen in a minute, so this is an app called Mavis Pro. Unfortunately, it is iOS only, so you'll only be able to use this on your iPhones or your iPads and Apple devices. But here's a link at the bottom for essentially the Android equivalent. It's called Cinema FV5 Lite. Both of these apps essentially unlock the potential of the camera within that device and gives you a whole suite of professional tools. So I'm pretty sure on your iPhones you won't be able to access your ISO, you won't get waveforms and audio levels and all these kind of professional tools. But using either Mavis or Cinema FE Lite, they give you those tools. It's free to use, And I say that because they do come with in-app purchases, where if you want more tools, you have to pay to unlock them. But essentially, I mean, especially with Mavis, which is the app that I use, it's about £17, I think, to unlock everything the app has to offer. And it essentially does the exact same thing as a £2,000 DSLR does. It's amazing where we're at. And it's all at your fingertips. But the free versions of both these apps, they do a really good job and have some really good tools. And I'm going to go through a few of those now. But I will be using Mavis Pro as the example. So this is essentially what it looks like when you open a Mavis app, where you've got your nice viewfinder, you've got audio levels on the right-hand side and clear buttons for your recording in the bottom right. And on the left there, you've got a whole suite of information there. So your ISO levels for lighting, and there's all different options for focusing, white balance, and your f-stop, and all sorts of different things. But we're going to be looking at all the options that come in the free version. So that's going to be using manual focus for your ISO and your depth of field as well. But this is essentially what it looks like. And like I said, with the Android version, Cinema FV Lite, it has the same functions, but it might look a little bit different in the display. So this is it's a simple little scroll wheel on the left-hand side of the viewfinder there. And as you can see in the GIF there, you'll see on the ISO levels how it links in with your exposure wheel there. So like anything when you're filming, you don't want it overblown like you see now, but you also don't want it too dark either. What's best is where you get the lighting perfectly without the assistance of the exposure wheel, but it just gives you more options there in case you might be at home that doesn't have so much natural light in there. So it gives you the tools to overcome those kind of problems. And then we've got the manual focus wheel, which is on the right-hand side of the viewfinder there. And depth of field, you need to be quite close to your object to play around with that. But the great thing about the depth of field is it gives you control in what you want the audience to see. And you can really use this to amazing effects on a story level. It might be if you shoot it from a character's perspective, and you can control what, the character, you can get across exactly what a character sees to the audience. And also it makes things look a little bit pretty. But like I said, it's not about making shots pretty, it's about shooting in the best way that tells the story. So these are just the two things that I like everybody to really focus on when they're filming at home, is thinking about the light and exposure, and also playing around with your depth of field as well. And these are all locked and really easy to use using these applications. So I know a big thing that I definitely discovered when I first tried to shoot at home using my phone was having a tripod. Cameras, using film cameras and industrial tripods, it just goes hand in hand really well. But obviously with phones, we're not going to be worried about going around with a tripod constantly. And even though they have really good stabilization, it's still not as effective as having a tripod instead of trying to use your hands and stabilization options. So on the left there, we've got I don't think it's the official Gorilla Pod, but it's a version of it where we've got these, it looks almost like a tripod, but you can bend all the legs. So you can attach your phone in a stable position onto almost any object. Really flexible and really easy to use. And they give you a lot of creative options as well. And so these tripods, they're usually about 10 to 20 pounds online. They're really easy to find and they're easy to use, and they're not too expensive either. Or you can go really creative and really almost like a gorilla style as well. So if you look on the right-hand side, there's all these really ingenious ways of creating tripods. You can have a really stable shot using a mobile device. My favorite one is definitely the paper cut one. It's so simple, just having a paper cut. You cut out a little slit on each side and you just slot your phone in and you have a tripod. It's absolutely genius. But obviously, mobile devices aren't cheap. So if you're thinking about creative ways in creating a tripod, or some kind of stable rig for your mobile phone. Do be careful. I don't want people destroying their tablets or phones because they're trying to create tripods there. But these are just some really creative and obviously very cheap ways of filming at home using tripods for your phones. And these, so lighting is a huge part of film. So you may be already thinking about lighting in your productions or not. But obviously, like you can see now, the lighting for me in this room is all right. But I've got lights positioned in a particular way, and I've got blinds open on the windows, but it's not quite perfect, and it doesn't really give me too much control. But again, using mobile devices, there's some ways we could get around lighting issues. And one thing is just using the brightness on your phone. So if you look on the first image on the left there, they've simply just, you can literally go into Google Images and find a white blank square. And if you zoom in on that and make sure the white, this white object takes up the whole of your phone screen, and then you just boost the brightness up to max. And then you've got yourself a handy little light there that you can play around with and light your subject. And also, I'm pretty sure there are free applications out there for either Android or iPhone where it turns the front of your screen into a light. So you don't have to go through Google Images and that kind of roundabout way. Also, if you're looking at creative lighting for those who are really into that as well. So you can use the same technique. So if you look on the image on the right, that's literally just a Google image search of a orange wallpaper or screensaver. They just put that on and boost the brightness up, and there you go. You've got an orange light, and you can do that with all sorts of different colors. You can play around with some really creative lighting just using your phone. And I've actually seen all sorts of different things that people have done as well, where you can use different objects. So if you use the light on the back of your phone and say, if you've got I've seen someone blow up a balloon, a white balloon, and used it as like a soft light, like a soft diffuser to play around with lighting. So again, like the tripod situation with mobile devices, there are so many creative ways of going about using lighting at home, only using mobile devices and options that you find. So that's all the production side of things. We're going to look at editing, and of course you need to think about theoretically with editing as well and how to craft a story. And the first thing is, no matter how many hours of footage you got, you need to watch through all the footage, because you never know what gold you've got. You might think in your head, say, if you've got a sequence of shots, and you think, oh, okay, no, that's probably rubbish. I vaguely remember what happened that day. But it's always best to look through, because you might find it could be a single frame that is just absolutely magical and adds to the story so much that you just need to put into your edit. So it may be really tedious and daunting, but it's always best to watch through all of your footage that you've captured. And when it comes to editing, it's really important to introduce the language and story early on in your film. And I imagine when you're filming with mobile phones and filming at home, your films may not be too long. A lot of people who film for like YouTube content and whatnot, they're usually about 3 minutes, roughly, these kind of short stories. So what I mean by introducing the language is introducing the style of filmmaking. So when you're editing these shots, is the whole film going to be made up of fast-paced cuts with your edits, or are you going to let shots play out and either add, heightened tension there? So there's all these different styles of editing that's going to influence the style of your film overall, and that's the language that I'm talking about. Is it a fast-paced kind of light-hearted film we've got going on, or you letting shots play out and add tension and it's a bit of a thriller or something quite dramatic? So it's about introducing that style early on, and from the first frame we get a sense of exactly what kind of story and what kind of film we're in for. And that's the thing with story as well. You may or may not heard of the inciting incident in the story. So the one event that has to happen to kickstart the story. So if we look at Star Wars, inciting incident is Luke getting a message from Princess Leia, and that sets him off on his adventure. Without that happening, there is no Star Wars, there is no story. So you need to get to that point within your story as soon as possible, and then you can dive straight into the meat of the film. And it's always good to find the tone and structure, which really links into the language that I'm talking about. So you need to think about what genre you're going into and how the editing is going to help dictate that. And that's going to be, the amount of shots that you're using, and also the time frame of each shot as well. That's all going to add to the tone. And with structure, be it documentary, or be it a, like a comedy sketch, or be it a full drama fiction film, you need to still incorporate your beginning, your middle, and your ending. So it's always important to, apply to those film theories as well. And of course, refer back to subject and story at all times. So whatever story you've come with at the start, and you've gone through production, now you're post-production, you need to link back to your original idea, because it can be quite easy to, steer away from your original vision as you're getting footage that you may not have thought that you'd capture, and you're in the edit and you start getting fresh ideas as you're seeing your original idea in a different light. So always refer back to your original vision and think, okay, is this linking to what we originally visioned, or are we just making a completely different film now in this edit? But overall, when it comes to editing, it's all going to come from the characters. The characters are going to be telling a story, and editing is essentially a way to help dictate and show to the audience exactly the character's perspective. So looking on the technical side of things, with editing on Adobe Rush. So Adobe Rush is almost like a stripped down version of Premiere Pro, which is a professional editing piece of software. But Premiere Pro is it can be very expensive. I mean, Adobe is a little bit pricey, but Adobe Rush is free to use. And it's a bit like the applications for filming, where with Adobe Rush, you can use it for free up to a point. So you can export a project up to 3 times, but that might just be enough to get across your filmmaking projects at home. And the only thing you need to do to access Adobe Rush is create an Adobe account, which is completely free. And the really good thing about Adobe Rush is that it pretty much works on everything, be it iPhone, iPads, Samsung phones and Android phones and tablets. It can even work on your computer or your Mac desktop as well. It works on everything. And like I said, you can use it for free up to a point. So Adobe Rush is a really great place to start with filmmaking at home. And I would go through a whole tutorial with Adobe Rush, but as expensive as Adobe can be, they actually have a really good tutorial built into the software when you launch it for the first time. And you can actually access the tutorial at any point as well in the main settings. So that's always really good. But this is essentially what Adobe Rush looks like when you open it and export a project in there. It just slaps all your clips together. But from there, it does give you a lot of options to cut and play around with your film. And you should hopefully end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So this was a mini documentary that I made. So just playing around with my Mavis Pro app that I use, and then putting it into Adobe Rush and cutting it all together. So I've got my main timeline there of all the interview footage. So this was a documentary that I made. And then we've got some B-roll footage, which you can place on top. So you can put as many layers into your timeline as you want. And you can play around with audio options. So I've separated my audio and had a little bit more creativity with my audio there. But also on the bottom there, you see there's a song. Well, we've got a soundtrack that's playing on throughout the film there. And that is actually free with the app. So Adobe Rush actually has a selection of free music. Because I know how expensive it can be to get licensed music that you can actually put out there. So this is all kind of royalty-free music that comes with the app that you can use. Of course, if there's any musicians out there, You can record your own tracks and you can easily put that into Adobe Rush. But like myself, I can only play the guitar really terribly. That's not going to make a good soundtrack. So I just use the Adobe Rush free music library there. So it gives you all the tools you need. It's not quite a professional piece of software like its older sibling Premiere Pro does, but for for sticking at home and editing on the go as well on your mobile devices, it's a really comprehensive toolkit to have. So these are two films that are actually completely shot on mobile devices. So you may or may not have heard of these. So Tangerine on the left there, that was a huge festival winner when it came out in 2015, I think it was. It was a few years ago. But that film was completely shot on an iPhone 5. So it was a while ago, and the only things they added to their phones when shooting was you can buy different lenses that attach to your phone. And again, they're pretty cheap as well. But there's links there as well to check out the trailers. You can see just how amazing the footage looks when it's all shot from the iPhone. And then we've got on the right there, that's Steve Soderbergh film, one of his latest, Unsane, and that was completely shot on an iPhone 7. And a lot of people really praise that film because you're shooting with such a small device. You can be a lot more creative with it, because the big problem with, if you look at professional film cameras, they're huge, they're bulky, they're noisy, so you're a little bit restricted. But with such a small device, you can put it literally anywhere, and it gets into some real nooks and crannies and right into the character's head almost. So there's a lot of creativity at play there because of using a mobile device. And again, the footage looks really good, but with Unsane, it actually helps with the story itself, and that's the key point there. So if these Hollywood directors can make festival-winning films, I'm pretty sure you can make some amazing content using your mobile devices and objects around the house as well. So that concludes the session on filmmaking at home. Hopefully you got some useful tips and tricks there to be able to make your own projects. So outside of this workshop, like Sam said at the beginning, we're running all sorts of different workshops. So we've actually been running a documentary workshop series, which will shortly be on YouTube as well for people to look. And with documentary workshops, there'll be worksheets, or we can present it to you live like we're doing now. And so if you're interested in those kind of workshops, just give us an email at arts@takeyourplace.ac.uk and we can see what we can do for you. But also, if you are going ahead and making projects at home, we would love to see those. So at the bottom of the slide there, we've got our Twitter and our Instagram handles. So if you are putting anything up, do tag us in. We would love to see what you come up with. But that's everything from me. Thank you again for joining. I'm going to be sticking around a little bit. So if you do have any questions, it could be to do with filmmaking at home and the session, or it could be anything to do with film at university or at Norwich University of the Arts in particular, or any of the workshops that we're also delivering. Now is your chance to pop into the chat and ask away.
We've not had any this then. Oh no, we've just had one come through, Gavin, which is about whether we'll be able to access the videos of this sort of recording after. So that's definitely something we'll be doing, and we are doing with all of our sessions. We'll be uploading this hopefully sort of sometime in the next few days, and we'll be able to send this link round to everyone. And hopefully you'll be able to see some of the other workshops that we've got going on there as well. A good question has also just come in, Gavin, around will having a green screen make any difference? And it's something maybe worth investing in.
So yeah, I mean, with green screens, you can obviously put your characters and story into literally any location. The thing with green screens, because yes, they're easily accessible, and you can get kind of portable green screens, which you can easily put up in a bedroom or any room in your home. The thing that comes with green screens is a lot of work in post-production. So you probably need other specific software, which you could get free ones. I'm just trying to figure on the top of my head kind of free software for using green screens. Because if you are an Adobe user and you're using Premiere Pro and After Effects, you can easily put green screen footage and play around with there. But you won't be able to use things like Adobe Rush to edit green screen footage. But I think there's an application called DaVinci Resolve. As far as I'm aware, that is free, and you can edit film in there, and that might have green screen options. And there's, I'm trying to think, there's kind of 3D programs like Blender as well. I think that might do editing with green screen. So it's about finding the appropriate software to be able to utilize the green screen that you've got. But certainly it opens up a whole world of possibilities of using it. You just need to invest a little bit in the technical know-how on how to implement different backgrounds and settings there.
Perfect. And it's just another question about specific sort of camera lenses for iPhones or for, for Android. Are there any that you have worked with that you would suggest maybe investing in as a core kit, really?
So I've not personally used any lenses for phones, but I know a lot of people tend to use different fisheye lenses that people use a lot of time. But it really depends on mobile devices as well, where, I mean, if you look at, I know there's a lot of people who use like the new iPhones, for example, when they've got, they've got multiple lenses attached to the phone itself, and they utilize that a lot, because then you've got your different settings there. But actually, third-party lenses that you attach to your phone, I've not played around with it myself, personally.
There's not been any other questions so far. I think that was great. That was really great session, though, to see how it makes you almost sort of like you can be a sort of independent filmmaker in that way, can't you? You can travel and carry all of your equipment in one place. Obviously, at the moment, we are not really able to travel and film things as would have been normal a few months ago, but it definitely compacts sort of the equipment that's required, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I've seen the BBC did a project where they got a news team to complete a professional news broadcast just using a phone, and they pulled it off amazingly. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, and I would send a link, but if you search out the BBC doing an iPhone news broadcast, and they actually go into depth on exactly how they did it. And they just used, I think it was 2 mobile phones. They had a couple of these third-party lenses that they attached. And they got microphones that plugged straight into their phones, and off and away they went. And they created a professional piece of news broadcast. So it's just amazing what we can do now. Like I said, there's phones out there shooting 4K footage. It's amazing.
Okay, great. Well, I don't think we've had any other questions for now, but obviously thank you again, everyone, for joining us. We will make this available as soon as we can. And if you are interested in any of the other workshops, including the sort of documentary workshop that Gavin mentioned as well, do check out our website and do get in touch as well if you can't find exactly what you're looking for. Some of those sessions are either upcoming sessions or ones that we can offer a bit more ad hoc. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon on other sort of sessions soon.
Yeah, thank you all very much. Take care.